I sat there at the dining room table, my hands folded in my lap, watching my son Michael explain to his sister how they were going to divide up my estate. Not after I died. Right now. While I was sitting there breathing, listening to every word. They talked about my house, my savings account, even the jewelry my late husband Henry had given me over 43 years of marriage. They spoke as if I wasn't there, as if I was already gone. But I wasn't gone. I was very much present, and what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. Sitting at my own dining room table, listening to my children plan my financial demise while I was still very much alive. My name is Agnes Whitmore, and I'm 76 years old. I've lived in the same house in Millbrook for 48 years, raised 3 children within these walls, and buried the love of my life in the cemetery just 2 miles down the road. Henry and I built a good life together. He worked as an engineer at the local manufacturing plant, and I taught elementary school for 32 years. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were careful with our money. We saved, we invested modestly, and by the time Henry passed away 3 years ago, we had built up a comfortable nest egg. Henry always told me, "Agnes, you're too trusting. You see the best in everyone, even when they're showing you their worst." He said it with affection but also with concern. He worried about what would happen to me after he was gone. He made me promise to keep our financial matters close to the chest, to not let anyone take advantage of me. I promised him I wouldn't, but I never imagined my own children would be the ones I'd need to protect myself from. I have 3 children. Michael is the oldest at 51. He's always been ambitious, always chasing the next big thing. He went into real estate development and for a while he did quite well. He married a woman named Veronica who came from money, and together they built what looked like a perfect life. Big house in the suburbs, 2 kids in private school, expensive cars in the driveway. But what looked perfect on the outside was crumbling on the inside. Michael had made some bad investments, and Veronica's family money had dried up faster than anyone expected. My daughter Patricia is 48. She's a lawyer, sharp as a tack, and she married another lawyer named David. They have 1 daughter and like Michael, they live a life that requires a substantial income to maintain. Patricia always had a calculating side to her, even as a child. She could work out what was fair down to the penny, and she never forgot when someone owed her something. Then there's my youngest, Thomas. He's 45, and he's always been different from his siblings. Thomas is a high school teacher, married to a wonderful woman named Sarah who works as a nurse. They have 3 kids, and they live modestly but happily. Thomas never asked me for anything, never seemed concerned about what he might inherit one day. He was the one who called just to check in, who brought the grandkids over on Sundays, who fixed my leaky faucet without being asked. After Henry died, I grieved deeply. We had been married for 43 years, and suddenly half of me was gone. The house felt enormous and empty. I wandered from room to room, remembering different moments of our life together. The kids came around more frequently at first, which I appreciated. Michael helped me with some financial paperwork. Patricia went through Henry's documents and made sure everything was in order legally. Thomas just sat with me, letting me cry or talk or sit in silence, whatever I needed. But after about 6 months, things began to shift. Michael started asking more questions about my finances. How much did Dad leave you? What's the house worth now? Have you thought about what you're going to do with everything? At first, I thought he was just concerned about my well-being, making sure I was financially secure. But the questions became more pointed, more frequent. Patricia started talking about estate planning. "Mom, at your age, you really need to have everything organized," she'd say. "You need to think about how you want things divided. You need to make sure there won't be any confusion later." She even offered to draw up documents for me free of charge. "It's what Dad would have wanted," she'd tell me. "He'd want you to have peace of mind." I kept putting them off, saying I wasn't ready to think about such things. And truthfully, I wasn't. I was still grieving Henry, still figuring out how to live alone after more than 4 decades of partnership. The last thing I wanted to think about was my own mortality and who would get what when I died. But they persisted. Michael started coming by every week, always with some new concern. "Mom, the housing market is really good right now. Have you thought about selling this place and moving into something smaller? Easier to maintain. Or, Mom, your savings are just sitting there. I could help you invest them properly, get you a better return. Patricia would call with legal advice I never asked for. Mom, you really should set up a trust. It would protect your assets. Thomas, bless him, never brought up money. He just asked how I was doing, help me with whatever needed fixing, and leave without expecting anything. Then came the incident that opened my eyes to what was really happening. It was about 8 months after Henry's death. Michael invited me over for Sunday dinner, which wasn't unusual. But when I arrived, Patricia was there too, without David or her daughter. Thomas hadn't been invited. That should have been my first clue. We sat down to eat, and Veronica was overly attentive, making sure my wine glass was always full. Agnes, you look wonderful, she kept saying. Doesn't she look wonderful, Michael? So strong, so healthy. After dinner, they ushered me into the living room, and Michael pulled out a folder. Mom, Patricia and I have been talking, and we're concerned about you, Michael began. Living alone in that big house, managing all those finances by yourself. It's a lot for anyone, especially at your age. I'm 76, not 96, I said. And I've been managing just fine. Of course you have, Patricia interjected smoothly. But we want to make things easier for you. We've drafted some documents that would give us power of attorney over your financial affairs. That way, if anything happens, if you get sick or have an emergency, we can take care of everything for you. I looked at the paper she slid across the coffee table toward me. Power of attorney? That seems extreme. It's just a precaution, Michael said. And it would really give us peace of mind, knowing we could help you if you needed it. Something in my gut told me not to sign anything. Let me think about it, I said, pushing the papers back toward Patricia. This is a big decision. I need some time. I could see the flash of annoyance cross both their faces, quickly masked by understanding smiles. Of course, Mom, Patricia said. Take all the time you need. We just want what's best for you. I left that dinner feeling unsettled. When I got home, I sat in Henry's chair in the quiet of our house, and I could almost hear his voice. Too trusting, Agnes. Too trusting. I decided I needed to understand exactly what they had been asking me to sign, so I called a lawyer I knew from my teaching days, Ellen Morrison. Her daughter had been in my 3rd grade class 20 years ago, and we'd kept in touch over the years. Ellen agreed to meet with me that week. When I showed her the documents Patricia had prepared, her face grew serious. Agnes, if you sign this, you would be giving them complete control over all your financial assets. Your bank accounts, your investments, your property. Everything. But they said it was just for emergencies if something happened to me. Ellen shook her head. Once you sign this, they could make decisions without your consent. They could sell your house, move your money, make investments in your name. You would have very little recourse to stop them. I felt cold. Why would they want that kind of control? Ellen hesitated, then spoke carefully. I'm not going to speculate about your children's motivations. But I will say that you should never sign away control of your assets unless you're absolutely certain it's necessary, and unless you completely trust the people you're giving that control to. I left Ellen's office shaken. Could my own children really be trying to take advantage of me? I wanted to believe it wasn't true, that I was misunderstanding their intentions. But the more I thought about it, the more their recent behavior made sense. The constant questions about money, the pressure to get things organized, the fact that Thomas had been excluded from that dinner. I decided to test my theory. Over the next few weeks, I paid close attention to my interactions with Michael and Patricia. Michael called to tell me about an amazing investment opportunity that I should definitely consider. I just need access to about $50,000 from your savings, he said. I'll double it in 6 months guaranteed. Let me think about it, I told him. Mom, opportunities like this don't wait. You need to move fast. Then I guess I'll have to miss this one, I said firmly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You're making a mistake, he said, and hung up without saying goodbye. Patricia called a few days later with a different approach. Mom, I've been thinking. That house is really too much for you. All those stairs, that big yard. What if you fell and no one was there to help you? I think you should seriously consider moving into an assisted living facility. There's a lovely one not far from my office. I don't need assisted living, Patricia. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Are you though? Be honest with yourself, Mom. You're not getting any younger. And think about how much equity you have in that house. You could sell it, use some of the money for a nice apartment in assisted living, and the rest could be invested for your future. Or, she paused meaningfully, you could consider gifting some of it to your children now, while you're alive to see us benefit from it. Dad would have wanted you to help us. There it was. The real agenda. They didn't want to wait until I died. They wanted access to my assets now. Your father wanted me to be taken care of, I said quietly. That's what he wanted. I'll talk to you later, Patricia. I hung up before she could respond. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about everything Henry and I had worked for. Everything we'd saved and sacrificed to build. We'd gone without vacations some years to put the kids through college. We'd driven old cars and cooked at home instead of eating out. We'd done it all so we could have security in our retirement and so our children would have a good start in life. And now those same children wanted to take what we'd built before I was even gone. The next morning I called Thomas. Can you come by for coffee? I asked. He came over that afternoon and I told him everything. The dinner at Michael's house, the power of attorney documents, the phone calls pushing me to sell the house or hand over money. Thomas's face grew dark as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mom, I had no idea they were pressuring you like this. Did you know they were having financial trouble? He sighed. I knew Michael had made some bad investments. And I heard through the family grapevine that Veronica's family cut them off financially. But I didn't know things were bad enough that they'd come after you. What about Patricia? She and David are house poor. They bought that mansion thinking their incomes would keep growing. But the legal market got more competitive. I think they're leveraged to the hilt. He reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, you can't give them power of attorney. You can't give them access to your money. They'll bleed you dry. But they're my children, I said, tears starting to fall. How did I raise children who would do this to me? You raised us to be independent and ambitious, Thomas said gently. Michael and Patricia just took it too far. They started measuring their worth by their wealth and status instead of by their character. That's on them, not you. Over the next few weeks, I tried to keep my distance from Michael and Patricia, but they ramped up their efforts. Michael started showing up unannounced, always with some urgent financial matter to discuss. Patricia sent me multiple emails with articles about elder care and estate planning. They were tag-teaming me and I could feel the pressure building. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late March, about 15 months after Henry's death. Michael called and said he needed to talk to me about something important, something that involved Patricia too. He asked me to come to Patricia's house the following Saturday. It's a family meeting, Mom. We need to discuss some things. Will Thomas be there? I asked. There was a pause. This really just concerns the financial matters that Michael and I have been handling with you. Patricia's voice came on the line. She must have been listening on another phone. Thomas doesn't need to be involved. Every instinct told me not to go. But I also knew I needed to see this through. I needed to know exactly what they were planning. So I agreed to come, but before that Saturday arrived, I made some calls of my own. First, I called Ellen Morrison and explained the situation. I need to understand all my options, I told her. And I need to protect myself. Ellen and I met twice that week. She helped me review all my assets, all my legal documents, and she helped me understand exactly what I could and couldn't do. More importantly, she helped me understand what Michael and Patricia could and couldn't do. Then I called my financial advisor, Robert Chen, who had worked with Henry and me for over 20 years. Robert, I need to know exactly where I stand financially. And I need some advice on protecting my assets. Robert was shocked when I explained what was happening. Mrs. Whitmore, I had no idea. Michael called me a few months ago asking about your accounts. And I told him I couldn't discuss client information without your permission. He seemed pretty angry about it. That's because he was trying to go around me, I said. Robert, I need your help. Robert and I spent hours going over everything. He helped me understand my true financial position, which was better than I had even realized. Henry had been very wise with our investments, and they had grown substantially. Robert also helped me set up some new accounts and make some strategic changes that would protect me. If they try to claim you're not competent to manage your own affairs, You'll have documentation showing recent, sound financial decisions, he explained. It will be much harder for them to make a case for taking control. By the time Saturday arrived, I was prepared. I was nervous, but I was ready. I drove to Patricia's house, that enormous showcase home with the circular driveway and the professionally landscaped yard. Veronica's Mercedes was parked out front, and I felt my stomach tighten. Patricia opened the door with a big smile. "Mom, come in, come in. We're so glad you could make it." She led me to the dining room, where Michael and Veronica were already seated at one end of the long table. Patricia's husband David was there too, sitting at the other end with a legal pad in front of him. This was an ambush. I could feel it. "Sit here, Mom," Patricia said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. I sat down and suddenly I was surrounded with Michael and Veronica on one side, Patricia on the other, and David at the far end. They had choreographed this. "Can I get you something to drink?" Veronica asked. "Water? Wine?" "Water is fine," I said. I wanted to keep my head completely clear. Patricia brought me a glass of water and then sat down. Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Mom, we asked you here because we're worried about you. We're your family and we love you, and we can see that managing everything on your own is becoming too much." "What makes you think that?" I asked calmly. "Well, you're living alone in that big house," Patricia said. "You're getting older. What if something happened?" "I have a medical alert system," I said. "And Thomas checks on me regularly." Michael's jaw tightened at the mention of Thomas. "Thomas isn't equipped to help you with important decisions. He's a high school teacher, Mom. He doesn't understand finance or legal matters. That's why Patricia and I need to step in." "Step in to do what, exactly?" David cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, what Michael and Patricia are proposing is that you allow them to take over the management of your financial affairs. For your own protection and peace of mind. By signing power of attorney over to them," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Patricia said. "We have the documents right here. David has reviewed everything. And it's all very straightforward. You would still have access to your accounts, of course. But Michael and I would be able to help you make decisions, handle investments, take care of property management. All the things that are probably stressful for you." "And what if I don't find them stressful?" I asked. "What if I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs?" Veronica laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Agnes, no offense, but you're 76 years old. How much do you really understand about modern finance? Michael has been in real estate for 30 years. Patricia is a lawyer. They know what they're doing. And I taught elementary school for 32 years, I said evenly, which taught me to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate me. And I've been married to a brilliant engineer who taught me everything he knew about money management. So I probably understand more than you think." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Michael sat back in his chair, his expression hardening. "Mom, we're trying to help you. Why are you being so difficult?" "I'm not being difficult. I'm asking questions. If this is really about helping me, then you should be able to answer my questions." "What questions?" Patricia asked, her lawyer voice coming out, sharp and controlled. "What happens to my house if I sign this power of attorney?" "The house would still be yours," David said. "But Michael and Patricia would have the authority to make decisions about it. For instance, if they felt it was in your best interest to sell it and move somewhere more manageable, they could facilitate that." "Without my permission?" There was a pause. "With your best interests in mind," Patricia said carefully. "That's not what I asked. Could they sell my house without my explicit permission?" David shifted in his seat. "Technically, yes. Once you sign power of attorney, they would have the legal authority to make those decisions." "And my savings? My investments?" "Same principle," Michael said. "We would manage them for you. Make sure they're invested properly, growing like they should be. Or you could use them for your own purposes," I said quietly. The room went completely silent. Veronica's mouth fell open slightly. Patricia's face flushed red. Michael stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "That's insulting, Mom. We're your children. We would never." "Then why didn't you include Thomas in this meeting?" I interrupted. "If this is really about my well-being, Why isn't your brother here? Thomas doesn't understand these matters, Patricia said dismissively. Or Thomas wouldn't go along with whatever you're planning, I said. Thomas would tell you this is wrong. Michael slammed his hand on the table, making the water glass jump. We're not planning anything. We're trying to protect you from making mistakes, from being taken advantage of. By whom? I asked. Who exactly is trying to take advantage of me? There are people out there, Veronica said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Scammers, con artists. They target elderly people, especially elderly women living alone. Like my own children. I asked. Patricia stood up now too. Mother, that is completely unfair. We have spent months trying to help you, trying to guide you, and you're throwing it back in our faces like we're criminals. I haven't thrown anything back. I've simply declined to sign documents that would give you complete control over everything Henry and I worked our entire lives to build. Dad would want us to have it. Michael shouted, his composure completely gone now. He would want his money to go to his children, not sit in some bank account while you hoard it. And there it was. The truth finally out in the open. They didn't want to protect me. They wanted my money. Your father wanted me to be taken care of for the rest of my life, I said, standing up now myself. That was his priority. His children, whom he put through college debt-free, whom he helped with down payments and wedding expenses and every major life expense, were supposed to be able to take care of themselves by now. Things happen, Mom, Michael said. Life is expensive. You have no idea how much it costs to maintain the lifestyle that Veronica and I have built. The lifestyle you can't afford, I said. That's what this is about. You've overextended yourself, and now you want me to bail you out. We're your family, Veronica shrieked. You're supposed to help family. I raised my family, I said. I fed you, clothed you, educated you, and launched you into the world. My job was to prepare you to stand on your own feet, and I did that. If you can't maintain your lifestyle, that's not my problem to solve. Patricia's lawyer mask had cracked completely. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, we need money. Yes, we were hoping you would help us. Is that so terrible? We're your children. You're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars that you don't even need, that you'll never spend, and you won't share it with your own family? How do you know what I need? I asked. How do you know what my expenses are, what my plans are for my future? What plans could you possibly have? Michael asked mockingly. You're 76 years old. You sit at home alone watching television. What are you saving all that money for? I looked at my oldest son, at the man I had cradled as a baby, taught to tie his shoes, cheered for at little league games and graduation ceremonies. I looked at my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful Patricia, who I had been so proud of when she passed the bar exam. And I realized that they saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. A problem to be managed, an asset to be liquidated. I think I should go, I said quietly. Not until we settle this, Patricia said, moving to block the doorway. Mom, you need to understand. We're not leaving this room until you agree to let us help you. Help me, I repeated. Or help yourselves? It's the same thing, Veronica said. If we're taken care of, you don't have to worry about us. We won't be a burden to you. You're already a burden, I said, calling me constantly, pressuring me, making me feel guilty for wanting to maintain control of my own life. That's been a burden for months now. David spoke up from his end of the table. Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps we should schedule another meeting. Give everyone time to cool down. There won't be another meeting, I said. Not like this. I moved toward the door, and Patricia grabbed my arm. Mom, please. Just listen. Let go of me, I said firmly. She did, her eyes widening at my tone. I had never spoken to her like that before. I walked to the front door, and they followed me, all of them talking at once, voices overlapping in a cacophony of justifications and pleading and barely suppressed anger. I turned on the doorstep and looked at them all. I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not signing power of attorney over to anyone. I am not selling my house. I am not giving you access to my bank accounts or my investments. What your father and I built is mine to manage as I see fit. If you cannot accept that, if you cannot have a relationship with me that doesn't revolve around my money, Then perhaps we need to take some time apart. You're being selfish. Veronica shouted. Your own grandchildren could benefit from that money. Michael Jr. needs a new car. Sophia's private school tuition is going up next year. And you're just going to hoard it all. I looked at Michael. Your son is 16. He doesn't need a new car. He needs to learn the value of money. And if you can't afford Sophia's tuition, perhaps she should go to public school. I did. You did. We all turned out just fine. I left them standing there on Patricia's front porch and drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got back to my house, I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time just breathing. Then I went inside, locked the door, and called Thomas. How did it go? He asked. About as badly as it could, I said, and told him everything. Thomas was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Mom, I'm so sorry. I knew they were struggling financially, but I never thought they'd push you like this. They thought I'd just roll over, I said. They thought they could pressure me into giving them what they wanted. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I need to protect myself. And I need to make sure they understand that I'm serious. Over the next few weeks, I didn't hear from Michael or Patricia. No phone calls, no visits, nothing. It was like I had ceased to exist for them. Thomas kept checking on me, but he said they weren't talking to him either. Apparently angry that he sided with me. But I wasn't sitting idle during this time. I was working with Ellen Morrison on a plan. Ellen had suggested something that at first seemed extreme, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. You need to take proactive steps, Ellen said. Right now, you're on the defensive, reacting to what they're trying to do. You need to get ahead of this, make it clear that you're in control and you're not going anywhere. So we worked on a comprehensive estate plan. Not the kind that Michael and Patricia wanted, where they could access my assets while I was still alive, but a real plan that would protect me and ensure my wishes were carried out exactly as I wanted. We set up a trust with Ellen as the trustee. Everything I owned went into the trust, which meant that even if Michael and Patricia somehow got power of attorney over me personally, they wouldn't have access to my assets. The trust couldn't be touched without Ellen's approval, and Ellen's job was to follow my instructions to the letter. We also drew up a comprehensive will. Thomas was named as the primary beneficiary, receiving 60% of my estate. He was also named as the executor, responsible for carrying out my wishes. The remaining 40% would be divided equally between Michael and Patricia, but with conditions. They would receive their inheritance in a trust that paid out gradually over 10 years, and only if they maintained certain standards of behavior, including no harassment or manipulation of family members. Is that legal? I asked Ellen. Can I really put conditions on an inheritance? Absolutely, Ellen said. It's your money. You can attach reasonable conditions. And given what they've tried to do, these are more than reasonable. But the most important part of the plan was something Ellen called a competency protection clause. Basically, it stated that I was of sound mind and body when creating these documents, and it established a very high bar for anyone to claim otherwise. If Michael and Patricia tried to argue that I wasn't competent to manage my affairs, they would have to provide extensive medical and psychological evidence. Ellen even had me undergo a comprehensive medical and cognitive evaluation, so there would be documentation of my excellent health and mental acuity. This way, Ellen explained, if they try to come after you legally, claim you're not capable of managing your affairs, you have ironclad proof that you were fully competent when you made these decisions. It took about 6 weeks to get everything in order. During that time, I also made some other changes. I switched banks, opening new accounts that Michael and Patricia knew nothing about. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to Thomas, Ellen, and a few close friends. I installed a security system at my house, with cameras at all the entrances. I even consulted with Ellen about getting a restraining order if it became necessary, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Then, in early May, I got a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was addressed to me but sent via certified mail, which immediately told me this was serious. I opened it with shaking hands. The letter was from a lawyer representing Michael and Patricia. It informed me that my children were deeply concerned about my mental health and my ability to manage my affairs. It claimed that I had become paranoid and irrational, that I was isolating myself from family, and that I was at risk of being exploited by outside parties. The letter went on to say that, in the interest of my safety and well-being, they were exploring legal options to have me declared incompetent and to have a guardian appointed to manage my affairs. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion. First shock, then hurt, then a cold, clear anger. They were actually trying to have me declared incompetent. They were going to try to take everything from me through the courts. I called Ellen immediately. "I got a letter," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They're threatening to have me declared incompetent." "Bring it to my office," Ellen said. "Right now." Within an hour, I was sitting in Ellen's office while she read the letter, her expression growing more stern with each paragraph. When she finished, she set it down and looked at me. "Well, they've made their move. Now we make ours. What do we do?" "First, we respond through legal channels. I'll draft a letter from this firm explaining that you have full legal representation, that you've recently undergone comprehensive medical and cognitive evaluations showing you're perfectly competent, and that any legal action they pursue will be vigorously defended. That will hopefully make them think twice about moving forward. And if it doesn't, then we go to court and we bury them in evidence of your competency. Medical records, financial records showing sound decision-making, testimony from Robert Chen about your financial acumen, testimony from Thomas about your daily functioning. They won't have a case, Agnes. They won't even get close. But it will cost money," I said. "Legal fees." "Yes, it will. But think of it as an investment in your independence. Would you rather spend money defending yourself? Or would you rather give in and let them control everything?" "I'd rather fight," I said. "Then that's what we'll do." Ellen drafted the response letter, and it was sent out the next day. But she also suggested something else. "I think it's time you went on offense," she said. "Stop hiding from them. Make it clear that you're not intimidated, that you're in control." "What do you mean?" "Call a family meeting. Get everyone together, including Thomas. Tell them exactly what you've done, what you've put in place. Make it clear that their tactics won't work, and that they need to accept your decisions." The idea terrified me, but I also knew Ellen was right. I couldn't keep hiding. I needed to face this head-on. So I sent an email to Michael and Patricia. It was short and to the point. "Family meeting at my house this Saturday at 2 p.m. Thomas will be there. You should be too. It's time we had an honest conversation about the future." Saturday couldn't come fast enough, and yet when it arrived I wished I had more time. Thomas came early to help me set up. We arranged the living room so that everyone would have a seat, but I would be in Henry's chair, the position of authority in our home. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Thomas asked. "I'm sure," I said. "It's time." Michael and Patricia arrived together, with Veronica and David in tow. They looked wary as they came in, and I noticed they didn't bring the grandchildren. They probably didn't want witnesses to whatever they thought was going to happen. Everyone sat down. Michael and Patricia on the sofa, Veronica and David on the chairs to the side. Thomas stood behind me, a quiet show of support. I looked at my 2 oldest children, these people I had raised, and I felt a deep sadness. But I also felt something else. Clarity. "Thank you for coming," I began. "I know the last few months have been difficult. We've said things that have hurt each other. But I asked you here today because I want to be absolutely clear about where things stand." "Mom, if this is about the letter," Patricia started. "Yes, it's about the letter," I said calmly. "The letter where you threatened to have me declared incompetent. The letter where you suggested I need a guardian to manage my affairs. Let me address that directly. I am not incompetent. I have recently undergone comprehensive medical and cognitive testing, and I am in excellent health for my age, both physically and mentally. I have full legal representation. My financial affairs are being managed responsibly and conservatively. Any attempt to have me declared incompetent will fail, and it will cost you a great deal in legal fees." Michael's face reddened. "We're concerned about you, Mom. You've been acting strange, cutting us off." "I've been protecting myself," I interrupted, "from children who see me as nothing more than a source of money to solve their financial problems." "That's not fair," Veronica said. "Isn't it?" I looked at her. "The dinner where you got me drunk and tried to get me to sign power of attorney? The constant phone calls asking about my assets? The investment opportunities that required me to hand over my savings? The pressure to sell my home? What would you call that? No one answered. I'll tell you what I call it, I continued. I call it financial abuse. That's the actual term. When family members pressure an elderly person to give them access to money or property, it's called financial elder abuse. We were not abusing you, Patricia said, standing up. We were trying to help. Help yourselves, Thomas said quietly from behind me. Be honest, Patricia. You're broke. You and David are drowning in debt from that house you can't afford. Michael's businesses are failing. You both need money, and you saw Mom as an easy target. Stay out of this, Michael growled at Thomas. This doesn't concern you. Actually, it does, I said. Because I've made some changes to my estate plan, and all of you need to know about them. I pulled out a folder from beside my chair. Ellen had helped me prepare copies of the relevant documents. I handed one to Michael, one to Patricia, and one to Thomas, though Thomas had already seen everything. What is this? Michael asked, opening the folder. That is my new estate plan. Everything I own has been placed in a trust, managed by my attorney, Ellen Morrison. Upon my death, 60% of my estate will go to Thomas. The remaining 40% will be divided between the two of you, but it will be paid out over 10 years in a trust, not as a lump sum. Patricia was reading quickly, her lawyer eyes scanning the pages. You can't do this. You can't just cut us out. I'm not cutting you out. You're still receiving a substantial inheritance, but you don't get to control it. You don't get to blow through it in a few years to maintain lifestyles you can't afford. Why does Thomas get 60%? Michael demanded. That's not fair. Fair. I repeated. Thomas is the one who has been there for me. Thomas is the one who checks on me, helps me, spends time with me without wanting anything in return. Thomas is the one who didn't try to manipulate me or threaten me or try to have me declared incompetent. That's why Thomas gets 60%. You're punishing us, Patricia said, her voice shaking. You're punishing us for trying to help you. I'm protecting myself, I said. And I'm rewarding the child who actually deserves it. You want to know what your father would think of all this? I looked at both of them. He would be ashamed. Ashamed that I raised children who would treat their mother this way. Veronica stood up, her face twisted with anger. You're a selfish old woman. You'd rather die alone than help your own family. Fine. We don't need you anyway. Then leave, I said quietly. If you can't have a relationship with me that doesn't involve my money, then yes, please leave. Michael stood too. You'll regret this, Mom. When you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you, don't come crying to us. I'll be fine, I said. I have long-term care insurance, a medical directive, and a plan for every eventuality. I don't need you to take care of me. I never did. They left. Veronica slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. David followed them out without a word. And Patricia was the last to leave. She stopped in the doorway and looked back at me. I hope you're happy, she said bitterly. I hope it was worth destroying your family. I didn't destroy this family, I said. Your greed did that. You and Michael did that when you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. She left without another word. The house was quiet after they were gone. Thomas came around and sat in the chair next to me. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I feel sad, but I also feel relieved. Like I can finally breathe again. You did the right thing, Thomas said. They needed to hear it. Did they though? Or did I just make everything worse? Mom, it was already worse. They were trying to take everything from you. You stood up for yourself. That's not making things worse. That's taking control. Over the next few weeks, I waited to hear from Michael and Patricia. Part of me hoped they would call, apologize, try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But the call never came. Thomas told me that he'd reached out to both of them, but they refused to talk about me. As far as they were concerned, I had made my choice and they had made theirs. It hurt. I won't lie about that. No matter how justified my actions were, they were still my children. I had held them as babies, kissed their scraped knees, celebrated their achievements. And now they were gone from my life, cut off by their own greed and resentment. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to realize something. I felt freer than I had in years. I wasn't constantly stressed about phone calls asking for money. I wasn't walking on eggshells trying to avoid conversations about my finances. I wasn't defending my choices or justifying my desire to maintain my independence. I was just living my life. Thomas and Sarah and their kids became even more central to my world. I babysat the grandkids, went to their school plays and soccer games. I had Sunday dinners at their house and hosted holidays at mine. Thomas never asked me for money, never made me feel like my value was tied to my bank account. He just loved me the way a son should love his mother. I also found myself making new friends. I joined a book club at the library, started taking watercolor classes at the community center, and volunteered at the elementary school where I used to teach. I had spent so much energy dealing with Michael and Patricia's demands that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just enjoy my life. One day, about 6 months after that final family meeting, I was working in my garden when my neighbor Judy came over. Judy was about my age, a widow like me, and we'd become close over the years. "Agnes, you look happy," she said. "Really happy. What's your secret?" I thought about it for a moment. "I stopped letting other people tell me what my life should look like," I said. "I stopped letting them make me feel guilty for wanting to live on my own terms." "Good for you," Judy said. "Life's too short to spend it pleasing people who don't appreciate you anyway." She was right. Life was too short. Henry and I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, for me to give it all away to children who saw me as nothing more than a means to solve their financial problems. Then, about 8 months after I'd last seen Michael and Patricia, something unexpected happened. Patricia called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Mom." Her voice was quiet, subdued. "It's Patricia." "I know." There was a long pause. "Can we talk? In person?" "About what?" "About everything. About what happened. About us." I thought about saying no. Part of me wanted to protect the peace I'd finally found. But another part of me, the mother part that never quite dies no matter how hurt you are, wanted to hear her out. "You can come to my house," I said. "Saturday afternoon. Just you, not David." "Okay. Thank you, Mom." That Saturday I was nervous. I prepared tea and cookies, old habits dying hard. When Patricia arrived, I was struck by how tired she looked. The polished lawyer veneer was gone, replaced by something more human, more vulnerable. We sat in the living room, and for a few minutes neither of us spoke. Finally, Patricia broke the silence. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything. For what I tried to do, for how I treated you. You were right. We were greedy. We were so focused on our financial problems that we lost sight of what matters." "What changed?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "A lot of things. David and I ended up selling the house. We moved into a smaller place, something we can actually afford. It was humiliating at first, but then it was also freeing. We're not drowning in debt anymore. We're not constantly stressed about money." She looked at me with tears in her eyes, and I realized that I had been willing to sacrifice my relationship with my mother for a house, for things. How messed up is that? Pretty messed up, I agreed, but my voice was gentle. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try to rebuild our relationship. Not because of money or inheritance or any of that. Just because you're my mom and I miss you. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. "I'd like that," I said. "But things have to be different, Patricia. I'm serious about that. I'm not going to be pressured or manipulated." "I know. And I won't do that. I promise." She hesitated, then added, "Michael's not ready yet. He's still angry. But I think eventually he'll come around too." "Or he won't," I said. "And I've made peace with that possibility. I'm not going to spend whatever time I have left trying to win over someone who doesn't want to be won over." Patricia nodded. "That's fair." We talked for 2 more hours that afternoon. Really talked the way we hadn't in years. She told me about her struggles, her fears, her mistakes. I told her about the loneliness I'd felt after Henry died, about how betrayed I'd felt by her and Michael's actions. It wasn't easy and it wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. And that was more than we'd had in a long time. Patricia started coming by every couple of weeks after that. Sometimes we'd have lunch, sometimes we'd just sit and talk. Slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding trust. She never asked me about money, never mentioned my estate plan, never tried to manipulate or pressure me. She just showed up as my daughter, and that was enough. Michael never called. Thomas would occasionally mention him, usually to say that Michael was still struggling financially, still angry about the whole situation. Part of me grieved for that lost relationship, but I also recognized that some people never learn. Michael was still looking for external solutions to internal problems, still waiting for someone else to rescue him from his own bad decisions. A year after that final family meeting, Thomas organized a surprise party for my 78th birthday. It was in Sarah's backyard and it was beautiful. All the grandkids were there, my friends from book club and the community center, Ellen Morrison and her family, even Patricia and her daughter. As I looked around at everyone gathered there, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Not for what I had, though I was grateful for my financial security, but for who I had. People who loved me for me, not for what I could give them. People who respected my autonomy and independence. People who wanted me in their lives because of who I was, not what I was worth. Thomas made a toast. To Mom, he said, raising his glass. The strongest, smartest, most independent woman I know. You taught us to stand on our own feet, and then you showed us how to do it when things got tough. We're all better people because of you. Everyone cheered and drank, and I found myself crying happy tears, which never used to happen but seemed to be happening more and more as I got older. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, I sat with Thomas and Patricia and the grandkids, watching the sun set over Sarah's garden. Patricia reached over and took my hand. I'm proud to be your daughter, she said quietly. I know I didn't act like it for a while there, but I am. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to just give in. That takes courage. It takes necessity, I corrected. I didn't have a choice. You did have a choice, Thomas said. You could have caved to the pressure. A lot of people would have. But you didn't. You fought for your right to live your life on your terms. I thought about Henry, about the promise I'd made to him before he died. That I wouldn't let anyone take advantage of me. That I would take care of myself. I like to think he'd be proud of how things turned out. Sad about Michael certainly, but proud that I'd stood my ground. Looking back now, I can see how every step of that journey was necessary. The initial pressure from Michael and Patricia taught me that I needed to be alert. The dinner where they tried to get me to sign power of attorney taught me they were serious. The family meeting where I confronted them taught me I was stronger than I thought. And the months of peace that followed taught me that sometimes the hardest choices are the right ones. Would I have preferred that my children never showed their greedy sides? Of course. Would I have preferred to maintain a relationship with all three of my children? Absolutely. But I couldn't control their choices, only my own. And I chose self-respect, independence, and dignity over being manipulated by my own family. My story isn't unique. I know that now. Ellen has told me about dozens of other cases she's handled. Elderly clients being pressured by their children for money or property. It's more common than people want to admit. We live in a society that sometimes teaches people to measure their worth by their wealth, and that can turn even good people into manipulators when they're desperate enough. But my story does have a somewhat happy ending, which not all of these situations do. I'm still here, living independently in the house Henry and I built our life in. I'm still financially secure, with a plan in place that protects me. I have a wonderful relationship with Thomas and his family, and a rebuilding relationship with Patricia. My grandchildren know me as a person, not just a wallet. And I've found a community of friends who enrich my life in ways I never expected. Most importantly, I found something I didn't even know I was looking for. Peace. The peace that comes from knowing I stood up for myself. The peace that comes from living authentically, making my own choices, maintaining my independence. The peace that comes from refusing to be a victim, even when the people trying to victimize me were my own children. I'm 79 now, 3 years after that pivotal family meeting. I still go to my book club, still take my watercolor classes, still volunteer at the school. I still have Sunday dinners with Thomas's family. Patricia comes by every week now, and we've grown close again in a way we weren't even before all this happened. Sometimes adversity brings clarity, and the clarity we've found is that our relationship is more important than money. Michael still hasn't reached out. Thomas tells me he's doing better financially now, that he downsized his business and his lifestyle, that he's on steadier ground. I hope that's true. I hope he's learning the lessons he needed to learn. And I hope that someday, before it's too late, he'll realize that he sacrificed a relationship with his mother for pride and money, and that the trade wasn't worth it. But if that day never comes, I'll survive. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. I've learned that setting boundaries, even painful ones, is sometimes necessary for self-preservation. I've learned that being a good mother doesn't mean being a doormat. And I've learned that the people who truly love you will respect your autonomy, not try to take it away. Last month, Ellen came by to review my estate plan. Something we do annually to make sure everything is still current and reflects my wishes. As we were finishing up, she smiled at me. You know, Agnes, when you first came to my office that day, I wasn't sure if you'd have the strength to follow through with everything. A lot of people in your situation just give in, let their family take over because it's easier than fighting. But you didn't. You fought every step of the way, and you won. It doesn't always feel like winning, I admitted. Not having Michael in my life still hurts. I know, Ellen said gently. But winning doesn't mean everything turns out perfectly. It means you stayed true to yourself, you protected what mattered, and you maintained your dignity. That's a win even when it hurts. She's right, I suppose. Life is complicated and family is messy, and sometimes there aren't perfect solutions. Sometimes you have to make hard choices and live with the consequences, both good and bad. But I can say this with certainty. I'd make the same choices again. I'd stand up for myself again. I'd refuse to be manipulated again. Because at the end of the day, the only person who has to live with my choices is me, and I can live with these choices just fine. I think about other people in similar situations, people being pressured by family members, people feeling guilty for wanting to maintain control of their own lives. And I want to tell them, it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to protect yourself even from family. Being someone's mother, or father, or grandparent doesn't mean sacrificing your autonomy. You can love your family and still maintain your independence. The other day, one of the younger teachers at the school where I volunteer was talking about her aging parents and feeling overwhelmed by guilt because they keep asking her for money. She was struggling with whether to give in or stand firm. What would you do? She asked me. I thought about everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned. I'd remember that love shouldn't come with strings attached, I said. Real love respects boundaries. Real love doesn't manipulate or pressure. And if someone is making you feel guilty for taking care of yourself, that says more about them than it does about you. She looked relieved, like I'd given her permission to do what she already knew she needed to do. Maybe that's part of my purpose now, in these later years of my life. Maybe sharing my story can help others find the courage to stand up for themselves, to set boundaries that protect their well-being and dignity. I think about Henry sometimes, wondering what he'd make of the woman I've become. I was always the softer one in our marriage, the peacemaker, the one who wanted everyone to get along. He was the one who could see through people's motivations, who could spot manipulation from a mile away. But grief and necessity have a way of sharpening your instincts. I learned to see what Henry always saw. That not everyone has your best interests at heart, even people who claim to love you. The house feels different now than it did in those months when I was being pressured and manipulated. Then it felt like a fortress I was desperately trying to defend. Now it just feels like home again. The place where Henry and I built our life, where we raised our children, where I'm choosing to spend my remaining years on my own terms. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had given in. If I had signed over power of attorney or sold the house or handed over control of my finances. I probably would have ended up in some assisted living facility, watching my life savings disappear into Michael's failed business ventures and Patricia's oversized mortgage. I would have lost my independence, my home, and my self-respect all at once. But that's not the path I chose. I chose to fight for myself when no one else would. I chose to trust my instincts when everyone was telling me I was wrong. I chose dignity over peace, boundaries over appeasement, self-respect over family harmony. And while the cost was high, losing 2 of my children, at least temporarily, the alternative would have cost me everything. Last week, Sarah brought the grandkids over after school, and we were sitting in the kitchen having snacks when 7-year-old Emma asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. Grandma, why don't Uncle Michael and Aunt Patricia come to visit anymore? Thomas had warned me this question would come eventually. The kids had noticed that holiday gatherings were smaller. that birthday parties didn't include everyone they used to include. I thought carefully about how to answer. Sometimes adults disagree about important things, I said finally. And sometimes those disagreements mean they need to spend time apart to figure things out. But you miss them, don't you? Emma asked with the brutal honesty that only children possess. Yes, sweetie. I do miss them. Then why don't you just say you're sorry and make up? Out of the mouths of babes. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that some apologies would require giving up your fundamental right to make decisions about your own life? How do you explain that sometimes loving someone means not enabling their bad behavior? Sometimes, Emma, saying sorry isn't enough if you haven't really learned from your mistakes. And sometimes the people who hurt you need to be the ones to apologize first. She seemed to accept this explanation, but it stayed with me for days afterward. Children see the world in such simple terms. If people love each other, they should just forgive and move on. But adult relationships are more complicated, especially when trust has been broken and manipulation has been exposed. If you need more help understanding your options or finding the courage to set boundaries with your own family members, don't hesitate to subscribe to hear more stories like mine. I received a Christmas card from Michael's family this year. It was addressed to me in Veronica's handwriting, with a generic holiday message and signatures from all of them. No personal note, no attempt at reconciliation, just acknowledgement that I still existed. I suppose that's progress of a sort, though it's hard to say what kind. I sent cards back to both Michael's and Patricia's families. For Patricia, I included a personal note telling her how much our renewed relationship meant to me. For Michael, I simply signed my name. Sometimes the best you can do is leave the door open without chasing someone through it. Thomas thinks Michael will come around eventually. Pride is a hard thing to swallow, he told me recently. But eventually he'll realize that his pride cost him his relationship with his mother, and he'll decide it wasn't worth it. And if he doesn't? I asked. Then that's his loss, not yours. You've done everything you can do. You've shown him that the door isn't locked, that you're willing to rebuild the relationship if he is. The rest is up to him. Thomas is right, of course. I can't force reconciliation, and I shouldn't have to sacrifice my dignity to achieve it. If Michael wants a relationship with me, he knows where I live and he has my phone number. Until he's ready to acknowledge what happened and commit to a different kind of relationship, one based on respect rather than financial expectation, there's nothing more I can do. Meanwhile, life continues to unfold in beautiful and unexpected ways. Patricia's daughter, my granddaughter Sophie, started college this year, and she comes to visit me regularly. She's studying social work, inspired, she tells me, by watching how families can both hurt and heal each other. "Grandma, you taught me something important," she told me during one of her visits. "You taught me that love without respect isn't really love at all. And you taught me that it's possible to set boundaries and still be a good person." Hearing that from her made everything worthwhile. If my struggle helped even one person in the next generation understand healthy relationships and personal boundaries, then the pain was worth it. I've also gotten involved with a support group for seniors dealing with family financial pressure. Ellen Morrison connected me with it, and I was shocked to discover how common my experience was. Every week, we hear stories of children pressuring elderly parents for money, trying to gain control of assets, making threats, or using guilt to manipulate their parents into compliance. Some of the stories make my situation look tame by comparison. One woman's son actually moved into her house uninvited and refused to leave until she signed over the deed. Another woman's daughter took out credit cards in her mother's name and ran up thousands of dollars in debt. A man in the group discovered that his son had been forging his signature on financial documents for months. But we also share success stories. Stories of people who found the courage to say no, who set boundaries, who protected themselves from exploitation. We celebrate each other's victories, mourn each other's losses, and remind each other that we have value beyond what we can provide financially. Being part of this group has given me a sense of purpose I didn't expect. I've become something of a mentor to newer members, sharing my experience and encouraging them to stand up for themselves. There's something powerful about realizing that your painful experience can help someone else avoid making the same mistakes or enduring the same mistreatment. One woman, Dorothy, joined the group about 6 months ago. Her situation was remarkably similar to mine. 2 of her 3 children were pressuring her to sell her house and give them access to her savings, while the third child was trying to protect her. She was torn between wanting to help her struggling children and wanting to maintain her independence. "I feel so guilty," she told the group during her first meeting. "They're my children. Shouldn't I want to help them?" "There's a difference between helping and enabling," I told her. "And there's a difference between asking for help and demanding it. If your children truly need assistance, there are ways they can ask for it respectfully, without trying to take control of your entire financial life." Dorothy ended up working with Ellen Morrison as well, setting up protections similar to mine. Her children weren't happy about it, but they ultimately backed down when they realized she was serious about maintaining her boundaries. Unlike my situation, Dorothy was able to preserve relationships with all her children, though those relationships looked different than they had before. "The pressure tactics stopped," Dorothy reported to the group a few months later. "Once they realized I wasn't going to cave, they had to decide whether they wanted a relationship with me or just access to my money. Thank goodness they chose the relationship." Not every story has such a clean ending, but Dorothy's success reminded me that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean losing everything. Sometimes it just means changing the terms of engagement. As I write this, it's been almost 3 years since that confrontational family meeting where I laid out my new estate plan and made it clear that I wouldn't be manipulated anymore. 3 years since I chose self-respect over family peace. 3 years since I discovered I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. Those 3 years have been among the most peaceful and fulfilling of my life. I wake up each morning knowing that my day belongs to me, that I won't be defending my choices or explaining my decisions to people who have already made up their minds about what I should do. I spend my time with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. I've traveled more in these 3 years than Henry and I managed in the decade before he died. Nothing extravagant: weekend trips to visit old friends, a cruise with my book club, a week at Thomas's family's rented beach house. But travel that I chose, paid for with my own money, without having to justify the expense to anyone. I've also discovered hobbies I never had time for when I was constantly stressed about family drama. I took up quilting and have made quilts for each of my grandchildren. I joined a walking group that meets 3 times a week at the local park. I even tried my hand at writing, starting with letters to the editor of the local newspaper, and eventually contributing a weekly column about senior life and community issues. Writing has become particularly meaningful to me. There's something therapeutic about putting experiences into words, about crafting stories that might help someone else feel less alone in their struggles. My column has generated quite a bit of response from readers, especially other seniors dealing with family pressure or struggling to maintain their independence. One letter particularly moved me. It was from a woman named Helen who wrote, "I've been reading your column for months, and your story gave me the courage to stand up to my son who was pressuring me to move in with his family. I realized I didn't want to spend my golden years being a burden or feeling like I had to earn my keep. Thanks to your example, I'm still living independently, and my relationship with my son is actually better now that I've set clear boundaries." Letters like Helen's remind me that our struggles, as painful as they are, can serve a purpose beyond our own growth. They can light the way for others facing similar challenges. But perhaps the most meaningful development of these 3 years has been watching my grandchildren grow up with a different understanding of family relationships. They've seen that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that being family doesn't give anyone the right to manipulate or pressure you, and that it's possible to disagree with people you love while still maintaining your dignity. Thomas's kids especially have learned these lessons in real time. They've watched their father support me through a difficult period without compromising his relationships with his siblings. They've seen me stand up for myself without becoming bitter or resentful. And they've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries that protect everyone involved. 10-year-old Marcus asked me recently if I was angry at Uncle Michael and Aunt Patricia. "Not angry," I told him. "Disappointed, maybe. Sad that things had to unfold the way they did. But not angry. Anger would only hurt me, not them." "But don't you want them to be sorry for what they did?" he persisted. "I want them to understand what they did," I said carefully. "I want them to learn from it so they don't treat anyone else that way. Whether they're sorry or not is up to them." This seemed to satisfy him, but it got me thinking about forgiveness and what it really means. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending things hadn't happened, going back to the way things were before. But I've learned that true forgiveness can coexist with boundaries. I can forgive Michael and Patricia for their attempts to manipulate and control me, while still protecting myself from future manipulation. I can hope for their growth and happiness while refusing to enable their bad behavior. Forgiveness, I've discovered, is something you do for yourself, not for the people who hurt you. It's about releasing the anger and resentment that would otherwise poison your own life. It doesn't require reconciliation, and it doesn't mean pretending that harmful behavior was acceptable. I've forgiven my children for seeing me as a means to their financial ends rather than as a person worthy of respect. I've forgiven them for underestimating my intelligence and my resolve. I've even forgiven them for the months of stress and anxiety they put me through with their pressure tactics. But forgiveness doesn't mean I've forgotten the lessons I learned. I'm still protected by the trust Ellen set up. I'm still vigilant about anyone who might try to take advantage of my age or perceived vulnerability. I'm still committed to maintaining my independence and making my own decisions about my life and my assets. The balance between forgiveness and protection has been one of the hardest things to navigate. There's always a part of me that wants to believe the best about people, especially family members. But experience has taught me that wanting to believe the best about someone doesn't mean ignoring clear evidence of their intentions. I think Henry would understand the woman I've become. He always worried about my tendency to trust too easily, but he also admired my compassion and my desire to see the good in people. The person I am now has learned to maintain that compassion while also protecting myself. I can still see the good in Michael and Patricia. They're not evil people, just flawed ones who made bad choices when they were desperate. But seeing their good qualities doesn't mean I have to make myself vulnerable to their poor judgment. This kind of nuanced thinking has taken time to develop. In the immediate aftermath of our confrontation, everything felt very black and white. They were wrong, I was right, end of story. But time and reflection have added layers of understanding. They were wrong to pressure me and try to manipulate me. But they were also scared about their financial futures, and perhaps didn't fully understand how their behavior was affecting me. Their intentions weren't malicious, but their actions were harmful. Understanding their motivations doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does make it easier to forgive them while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. I can have compassion for their fear and desperation without sacrificing my own well-being to alleviate those feelings. The holidays have been different these past 3 years, but different doesn't necessarily mean worse. Christmas morning is quieter at my house, but it's also more peaceful. There's no underlying tension, no walking on eggshells, no worrying about what someone might say or do. Patricia brings her family, Thomas brings his, and we have a lovely time together. We don't talk much about Michael's absence, but his empty chair is noticed. The grandchildren ask about him less frequently now, accepting that this is how things are. Patricia sometimes mentions him, updates about his business or his kids, but she doesn't push for reconciliation, and I appreciate her restraint. Last Christmas, Patricia gave me a gift that meant more to me than any expensive present could have. It was a photo album she put together, filled with pictures from throughout our family's history. Pictures of Henry and me when we were young, pictures of the kids growing up, pictures of holidays and birthdays and ordinary moments that made up the fabric of our family life. I wanted you to have these, she said as I flipped through the pages. I wanted you to remember that we had good times too, that it wasn't all about the money troubles and the fighting. She was right. Looking at those pictures reminded me of family camping trips and birthday parties and Christmas mornings when the children were small, and our biggest worry was whether Santa had brought everything on their lists. We had been a happy family once, before financial pressures and adult responsibilities complicated everything. Thank you, I told her, my eyes filling with tears. This is beautiful. I love you, Mom, she said quietly. Not for what you can give me, just for who you are. I hope you know that now. I did know it. Her actions over the past couple of years had proven it in ways her words never could. She'd rebuilt our relationship without asking for anything in return, without pressing me about my estate plan or my financial decisions. She'd shown me that it was possible to have a loving relationship with family members based on mutual respect, rather than financial expectation. If Michael ever decides he wants that kind of relationship too, the door is open. But I'm no longer waiting for him to walk through it. I've learned to build a full and satisfying life without his participation, and while I would welcome his return, I no longer need it for my own happiness. This shift in perspective has been liberating. For too many years, I measured my success as a mother by whether all my children were happy with me. If one of them was upset or distant, I felt like I had failed somehow. But I've learned that being a good parent doesn't mean being a people pleaser. Sometimes it means disappointing your children in service of a larger principle. I didn't fail Michael. I raised him with good values, supported him through childhood and young adulthood, and launched him into the world with every advantage Henry and I could provide. If he chose to prioritize money over relationships, if he chose manipulation over honest communication, if he chose pride over reconciliation, those are his choices, not my failures. This realization has been one of the most freeing aspects of this entire journey. I spent months feeling guilty, wondering if I had been too harsh, questioning whether I should have handled things differently. But I've come to understand that guilt was misplaced. I didn't create the situation that led to our estrangement. I simply refused to enable it to continue. Every parent wants their children to be happy and successful. But true success isn't measured by the size of your bank account or the value of your possessions. It's measured by your character, your integrity, your ability to maintain healthy relationships, and your capacity to find meaning and purpose in your life. By those measures, Thomas has been incredibly successful. He's built a happy marriage, raised wonderful children, contributed to his community through his teaching, and maintained strong relationships with the people he loves. He's never been wealthy by material standards, but he's rich in all the ways that matter. Patricia is learning to measure success differently too. Downsizing her lifestyle was initially humiliating for her, but it ultimately freed her from the constant financial pressure that was driving so many of her decisions. She and David are happier now, more focused on their family and their relationship rather than on maintaining appearances. I hope Michael will eventually learn these lessons too. I hope he'll realize that the respect and love of his family are worth more than any amount of money. I hope he'll discover that true security comes from living within your means and building strong relationships, not from manipulating others to solve your financial problems. But whether he learns these lessons or not, my life goes on. I'm 80 years old now, and I've learned not to waste time waiting for other people to change or apologize or make amends. I focus on the relationships that are healthy and fulfilling, on the activities that bring me joy, on the ways I can contribute to my community, and support the people I love. I volunteer more regularly now at the elementary school where I used to teach. There's something wonderful about being around children, with their boundless energy and curiosity, and their uncomplicated approach to relationships. They don't care how much money you have or what you can do for them. They just want someone to listen to them read, to help them with their math homework, to appreciate their artwork. Working with children has also reminded me of the teacher I used to be. The person I was before I became defined primarily as someone's wife or mother or potential source of financial assistance. I had an identity and a purpose that existed independently of my family relationships, and rediscovering that has been incredibly empowering. One of the second graders I work with, a little girl named Maria, drew me a picture last week. It was a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with "Thank you for helping me" written in shaky letters across the top. "This is you and me," Maria explained, pointing to the stick figures. "You're my friend." It was such a simple statement, but it moved me profoundly. To Maria, I wasn't an elderly woman with assets to be managed or financial decisions to be questioned. I was just her friend, someone who cared about her and wanted to help her learn. That's the kind of relationship I want to have with everyone in my life, based on who we are as people, not what we can do for each other. That evening, I called Thomas and told him about Maria's drawing. "You know what I realized today?" I said. "I'm happier now than I was before all this happened with Michael and Patricia. I'm more myself than I've been in years." "That doesn't surprise me," Thomas said. "You were carrying a lot of stress, trying to manage their expectations and their financial pressure. Now you can just be yourself again." He was right. The months of manipulation and pressure had changed me in ways I hadn't even realized at the time. I had become anxious, defensive, constantly braced for the next request or demand. I had started to see myself through their eyes, as someone whose primary value was financial, whose decisions needed their approval, whose independence was a problem to be solved rather than a right to be respected. Reclaiming my sense of self has been a gradual process. It started with setting boundaries, But it continued with rediscovering my own interests, rebuilding confidence in my own judgment, and surrounding myself with people who valued me for who I am rather than what I have. The woman I am today is stronger than the woman I was 4 years ago, but she's also more at peace. She knows her worth isn't determined by her bank account or her willingness to sacrifice her independence for others' comfort. She knows that being kind doesn't mean being a pushover, that being generous doesn't mean being exploited, and that being a good mother doesn't mean enabling poor behavior in adult children. If I could go back and change how things unfolded, would I? It's a question I've asked myself many times. Would I prefer that Michael and Patricia had never tried to manipulate me, that our relationships had remained uncomplicated, that I had never had to learn these painful lessons about family dynamics and financial exploitation? In some ways, yes. I would prefer to have all my children in my life, to have family gatherings that include everyone, to have never experienced the hurt and disappointment of realizing my own children saw me primarily as a financial resource. But in other ways, no. The experience taught me things about myself I might never have learned otherwise. It forced me to develop strength and independence I didn't know I possessed. It showed me the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships. And it led me to a life that, while different from what I had planned, is in many ways more authentic and fulfilling than what came before. I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone, but I'm grateful for the person it helped me become. I'm grateful for the relationships it helped me deepen, particularly with Thomas and Patricia. I'm grateful for the clarity it brought to my priorities and values. And I'm grateful for the peace that comes from living authentically, making your own choices, and refusing to compromise your dignity for the sake of others' comfort. As I finish writing this story, I'm sitting in Henry's chair in our living room, looking out at the garden we planted together 40 years ago. The roses are blooming, the tomatoes are coming in, and everything looks exactly as it should. This is my home, my sanctuary, my choice. No one can take that away from me because I didn't let them. If you're reading this and recognizing elements of your own story, if you're being pressured by family members, questioned about your decisions, made to feel guilty for wanting to maintain control of your own life, I want you to know that you're not alone. And more importantly, I want you to know that you have the right to say no. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to live your life on your own terms, even if that disappoints people who expected something different from you. It's never too late to stand up for yourself. It's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to choose dignity over peace, authenticity over approval, self-respect over family harmony. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. The people who don't respect your boundaries are showing you something important about their priorities. Believe them and act accordingly. Your life is yours to live. Your decisions are yours to make. Your assets are yours to manage. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, no matter how much they claim to love you or want to help you. You are stronger than you know. You are braver than you feel. And you deserve better than to spend your precious time on this earth apologizing for wanting to be treated with dignity and respect. That's the most important lesson I learned from this whole experience. That at any age, at any stage of life, you have the right to demand better for yourself. And sometimes, demanding better means disappointing people who expected you to settle for less. I chose better. And despite everything it cost me, it was worth it.